And that someday, you might be sitting up here in this building in a mayor seat. Of course, if you do, I hope you do a better job. So you never know what's going to happen to you, but just think about it. You know, and it don't make no difference what walk of life you come from, where you come from. He was a poor man, he had nothing. You just have to see what happened to him. So you just remember that. You can be anything you want to be. You know what? You can sit right there. You can go to France today. Just go up to the library, pick out a book on France, and learn all about it. That's how we find out things. That's how we learn things. You educate yourself. That's what Lincoln did. He educated himself. So, to my own opinion, there's no such a thing as a dummy. Only if you want to be, like his young son Tad. He chose to be somebody without an education. Too bad. He was a good boy. He was smart. He learned how to make a dime when he was a kid. But he could have turned that into a lot of money if he got a little more education. If he thought about what he was doing. He could have really made a fortune. Instead of 10 cents, by the time his father won the second election, he could be getting $5. So anyway, now, what I'm going to do is, are you going now or are you going now?
I could go. You want me to go first?
Doesn't matter.
Well, sure, you can go first.
Okay. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to present to you Alana Zimrinsky. She's the president of the Ladies Auxiliary, and she's going to talk to you about Mary Lincoln.
Abraham Lincoln.
Oh, Abraham, I'm sorry. Holy cow, he's really getting it today, Abraham.
I'm just going to kind of, talk a little bit more about
All right.
what you did.
You go ahead.
All right, thank
Here she
you.
is.
So, which U.S. president is on the penny?
Lincoln.
Abe Lincoln, okay. So I have some souvenirs for the kids. All right, we can pass this around. All right, every kid can get a penny, and you can take one and pass it along. So those you can't eat, but these you can. These are from Gertrude Hawks, and these are chocolate pennies, so everyone takes one. All right, there you go. Okay, so I'm going to just expand a little bit on what Hal was talking about with Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln is remembered for his vital role as the leader in preserving the Union during the Civil War and beginning the process that led to the end of slavery in the United States with the Emancipation Proclamation. He is also remembered for his character and leadership, his speeches and letters, and a man of humble origins whose determination and perseverance led him to the nation's highest office. President Lincoln endured extraordinary pressures during the long Civil War. He carried on despite generals who weren't ready to fight, assassination threats, bickering among his cabinet members, huge loss of life on the battlefields, and opposition from some groups such as the Copperheads. However, Lincoln remained brave and persevered. He didn't give in to the pressures and end the war early. He kept fighting until the Confederacy was defeated. A lesser man would have given in and stopped the war before the goals had been achieved. Lincoln did not do this. The Emancipation Proclamation didn't immediately free any slaves because it only applied to territories not under Lincoln's control. The actual fact is that legal freedom for all slaves in the United States did not come until the final passage of the 13th Amendment in December of 1865. Lincoln was a strong supporter of the amendment, but he was assassinated before its final enactment. President Lincoln's domestic policies included support for the Homestead Act. This act allowed poor people in the East to obtain land in the West. He signed the Morrill Act, which was designed to aid in the establishment of agricultural and mechanical colleges in each state. Also, he signed legislation entitled the National Banking Act, which established a national currency and provided for the creation of a network of national banks. In addition, he signed tariff legislation that offered protection to American industry and signed a bill that chartered the first transcontinental railroad. Lincoln's foreign policy was geared toward preventing foreign intervention in the Civil War. His most famous speech was the Gettysburg Address. In the address, Lincoln explained that our nation was fighting the Civil War to see if we would survive as a country. He stated it was proper to dedicate a portion of the Gettysburg battlefield as a remembrance of the men who had fought and died there. Lincoln said that the people who were still alive must dedicate themselves to finish the task, that the dead soldiers had become, which was to save the nation so it would not perish from the earth. One important way Lincoln affects contemporary society is that we look back on his presidency as a role model for future generations. Lincoln's high character affects us because we compare present-day politicians to the example Lincoln set. Another effect is the area of quotations. Politicians love to quote Abraham Lincoln because Lincoln is considered America's wisest president. A major effect Lincoln has on the U.S. today is simply through the good example he set when it came to leadership and integrity. Many American politicians in our time try to emulate his thinking by using Lincoln quotes in their speeches. Lincoln had a benevolent leadership style in contrast to oppressive or authoritarian, participatory or democratic, or laissez-faire, hands-off. When there was disagreement among advisors and himself, his leadership style often involved telling a story that demonstrated his points. Lots of times this method worked, and people admired and respected him for it. He would virtually disarm his enemies with his highly moralistic, skillful leadership. He possessed qualities of kindness and compassion, combined with wisdom. In fact, one of his nicknames was Father Abraham. Like George Washington, Lincoln demonstrated an extraordinary strength of character, but his unique style of leadership involved telling stories, which explained his actions and influenced others to follow his lead. He rose to the top through sheer ambition and hard work. He had nearly no education at all. He spent less than 12 months attending school as a youth, growing up at the frontier. Each one was very small, and the lessons were often taught orally, as the schools got the nickname Blab Schools. Later, when he moved to New Salem, Illinois, he began to study law books in his spare time. In New Salem, he earned the nickname Honest Abe. He was almost totally self-educated and became a lawyer in 1836, although he never attended college. He was a very successful attorney with a large practice prior to his election as president in 1860. Additionally, he served 4 terms in the Illinois State House of Representatives and 1 in Congress. Perhaps the most important action he took was his decision to fight to preserve the Union. In the end, this decision to fight the Civil War resulted in the USA remaining one nation rather than splitting into 2 separate countries. Although he was criticized for stepping over the traditional bounds of executive power, he was faced with the greatest threat to federal authority in the history of the country. He felt his job was to protect the Union from disintegrating. Also, his contribution to the area of freedom for the slaves is very important. He got the ball rolling with the Emancipation Proclamation. We honor Abraham Lincoln for his actions in preserving the Union and beginning the process of freedom for slaves. And here are some of his most famous quotes. "A house divided against itself cannot stand. Nearly all men can stand adversity, but if you want to test a man's character, give him power. You cannot escape the responsibility of tomorrow by evading it today. Be sure you put your feet in the right place, then stand firm. My dream is of a place and time where America will once again be the last hope of earth." And my personal favorite, "Always bear in mind that your own resolution to succeed is more important than any other." He has left a lasting legacy. There are schools, parks, streets, ships, and more named after him. He appears on Mount Rushmore, along with Theodore Roosevelt, Thomas Jefferson, and George Washington. Right down the street in Nyack Park, there's a Lincoln Memorial Monument with a metal relief of Lincoln on it and the Gettysburg Address. A swimming complex opened there in 1909 and was called Lake Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln was a wise man. Although his time on earth was cut short, he fulfilled his destiny and changed the course of history of the U.S. for the better. Thank you so much for being here today and in participating in this event. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jerry.
Okay. We heard the whole history of Abraham Lincoln. Now I'm going to talk about one little aspect of him. And it revolves around his first experience at Washington, D.C. as the President of the United States. Now, let me ask you a question. Who among you, any among you, had had the experience of being the new kid on the block? And by that I mean is the new kid moving into a new neighborhood, or a new kid walking into your classroom and sitting down there and being introduced to you by the teacher. Yes. Then
All of the
you'll
above.
know what I'm talking about.
All of the above.
Yeah, because this really happened. This youngster moved in to the classroom in this school from a western state, many, many miles away. And on top of that, he came in from a rural area. And he moved into this sophisticated suburb of New Jersey. And he came into the school, and he was very intelligent, very polite, but rather shy. And he went into the classroom and was introduced by the teacher, and he sat down. He came back the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that, and then finally he went to his parents and said, crying, he didn't like school. And here he was, a very intelligent, studious young boy in this rural area that he came from. And his parents came to the principal and said, "You don't know what's wrong. You don't know. He just doesn't like school anymore. What is it about this school that's so different from the school that he came from that he loved? And now he wants to quit school." And the principal said, "Well, let me look into it. And when I find out some more information, I'll call you back." And this is what she did. So she went into the classroom and talked with the teacher, and then talked with the youngster, and found that the youngster was, well, he was taller than other kids, about 3 or 4 inches. He was tall, thin, and shy. He also was not used to the way that people dressed in this classroom, because he was still in his clothes that he wore in this rural area. And of course, in suburban New Jersey, you gotta be with it, you know, with the latest insignias and shirts and the trousers and so on. And he didn't get, it was difficult for him to make friends, I'll just put it that way. And on top of that, he was kind of ignored by the other students in the class. I mean, when it came to the time when they went out to the playground to play, you know, and they gathered teams together to work, they ignored him all the time. And they made fun of him. They made fun of him because he had a rather prominent nose. He was taller than the others. He was thinner than other people. And he was just ignored. Now think what it's like to be like that. Think what it's like to be a youngster in a classroom, a new youngster in a classroom, and think what it's like to be a student in the classroom who focused in on this youngster and ignoring him. Okay? All right, now just keep that in mind. Because this is what happened in some ways.